Jai Shri Ram, everyone. Today is April 14th here in the United States where I am, which of course means that it is Bhim Jayanti today, the birthday of Bhimrao Ambedkar, who I think is one of the most harmful and divisive figures in Indian political history. So I thought I'd make a video talking about him and why I feel that way. Now, the reason I think it's very important for us to talk about this issue is because a lot of people who are otherwise kind of right wing or pro Hindutva, pro Sangh, and all of that really like Ambedkar a lot because one, they want to try to bring lower caste people into the fold of Hindutva, and two, Ambedkar himself had many negative things to say about Islam and Muslims, and so there is a portion of our kind of ideological wing, unfortunately, that thinks anyone who is critical of Islam at all is on our side somehow, as if the entire world outside of Muslims themselves and the left are not also anti-Islam. I mean, that's what I see when I look out at the world. It seems like other than Muslims and leftists in various countries, pretty much everybody else of any other kind of persuasion is against Islam also. So the fact that someone is against Islam, thinks that it's bad and that the Muslim community is generally harmful, that in and of itself doesn't mean that that person is on our side ideologically. So that's one big caveat that I would say with Ambedkar as a person, just on that one issue. But the larger issue, the larger reason that I see him as divisive and harmful is the fact that it's because of him that Dalit politics exists in India. If you really go back and look at the history, I mean, before there was, Chandrasekhar Azad Ravan, of course, he named his organization Bhim Army. Mayawati and Kanchiram before her, they of course saw Ambedkar as a huge influence. If you look at any kind of Dalit politician, by Dalit politician, I mean a politician who is trying to organize Dalits specifically, not just any politician who happens to come from an SC background. They would all see Ambedkar as one of, if not their primary influence and motivation. And before him, that really didn't exist at all. If you think even of the word Dalit, of course, that doesn't appear in any Smriti or Shastra or anything like that. It's a word that just means broken. And, we have related words in North Indian languages that sound similar to that mean, nothing to do with caste system or anything like that. And from what I can understand from my reading, it was Jyotirao Phule, who was one of Ambedkar's main influences in his worldview, that actually coined the term Dalit and started to try to popularize it among people. And he was extraordinarily, he's the most divisive figure on caste that you can really imagine. I mean, he wholeheartedly believed in the Aryan invasion theory, in fact, and saw the upper caste people as being invaders and all of this kind of stuff. Even Ambedkar himself didn't believe in the Aryan invasion theory at all, which is quite interesting. But anyway, the reason that I think that this specifically is so divisive is that if you were to look at what are the threats to Hindutva in India, you can say Muslims are a threat, Christians are a threat, and by Muslims I mean Islam, and by Christians I mean Christianity and growing Christian conversion, that these are threats. But these are two religions that are pretty old, and Christianity is 2,000 years old, Islam is 1,400 years old. Both of these religions have a long storied history outside of India also. But Dalit politics, even though there may have been people from certain communities that had untouchability practiced against them all over India, they never had a consciousness that they're all one identity. Like, for example, Brahmins had, since time immemorial, all over India, Brahmins understood themselves to be one group. Or if you look across the heartland, you see Yadavas spread across. They had an idea that they are part of one group. Or in more recent time, Rajputs, despite being very spread out, they have an idea that they're one somewhat cohesive set of groups of people, right? But Dalits never had this kind of an idea until Jyotirao Phule and Ambedkar and these kinds of figures kind of told them, this is who you are. All of you across India share these certain experiences and you should kind of unite and agitate for your own your own rights and advancement and so on. And I think that obviously the whole goal of Hindutva is one, right? You're trying to unite all of the Hindus across different castes, different languages, different regions of the country. And if you have a competing ideology that is trying to tell Dalits who, I mean, if you look at census data, scheduled caste people are like 20 to 25% of the Hindu population, which is quite a large proportion. If they have a competition with their loyalty between Hindutva and Dalit politics, that's obviously going to be a huge impediment to the furthering of Hindutva. So that's the main reason that I see him as divisive and harmful. Now, as far as his own actual teachings and ideas, he said a lot of things that were very derogatory towards Hinduism and was totally opposed to it. And this is another thing that I think a lot of right-wing people miss, because they think, well, he converted to Buddhism as opposed to Islam or Christianity. Therefore, since he converted to a dharmic religion as opposed to an Abrahamic one, this somehow makes him a dharmic person. But if you read his books, if you read what he said about Buddhism, what becomes clear is two things. One, he was shopping for religions. He studied Islam, Christianity, Sikhism, and was actually very interested in converting to Sikhism, but then he thought either that whatever kinds of concessions the British were trying to give to Dalits in terms of, something like reservations were not going to happen, and he also felt that the already existing Sikh community would kind of discriminate against them. And if you're familiar with Punjab at all, you would know that the Sikh community has a lot of caste divisions with not untouchability, but a lot of discrimination and so on and so forth within them, if you're comparing like Jat Sikhs to Mazhabis and Ramgarhiyas and all of these different groups, right? So he didn't want to convert to Sikhism. He ends up choosing Buddhism, but he doesn't convert to, Vajrayana Buddhism or Mahayana Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism or Zen Buddhism, any of these actual sects of Buddhism that have a long storied history of centuries and centuries. He instead creates a new sect, which he calls Navayana, the new vehicle of Buddhism. And it's basically just a social reform movement that's disguised as a Buddhist sect. And he even, when he would go on these kind of conversion drives where people would, he'd give some rousing speech to a bunch of Dalits and they would convert en masse to Buddhism, there were these 22 vows that he wanted people to take and that he took when he did this so-called conversion. The first 6 of these are about not having faith in Hindu gods, not performing Hindu rituals, not believing that Buddha was an avatar of Vishnu, so on and so forth, which really shows you that, obviously Buddhism, which grew out of Hinduism, and anywhere where Buddhists and Hindus live side by side, you see enormous amounts of syncretism in their traditions. I mean, Nepal would be the absolute perfect example, obviously. And you also see in Southeast Asia all the incredible syncretism that exists there between Buddhism, Hinduism, and then their kind of traditional indigenous traditions that they had before they encountered Indian culture as well. So that really shows you that he was not someone who was trying to accept Buddhism and live a Buddhist lifestyle. He just saw taking the garb and symbolism and names of that as a kind of legitimizing force for his kind of ideology. And I wanted to close with this. I saw this article on dailyo.in. If you're not familiar with what dailyo.in, it's a left-wing English language like blog and news site where people write articles from a very left-wing kind of a view. But I think it's, as I've mentioned before on my channel, I think it's important for people to look at what our ideological enemies say, because if it's only when you look at what they say that you can understand how they think, and it's only when you understand how they think that you can actually, speak against them and try to convince people that what they're saying is not valid. But anyway, they created an article called 10 things Ambedkar said in his lifetime that the BJP wouldn't bear to hear. And if you go through this article, obviously what their point is that the BJP is co-opting Ambedkar and Ambedkar is not rightfully the kind of ideological property of the BJP and stuff. Of course, they think that because they're left-wing. But the points that they bring up, I think, are totally valid because what's stated in this article is actually factual things that Ambedkar did say. Some of that is the vows that I mentioned earlier. He also was both, not only was he opposed to the Muslim League and partition, he was also opposed to the Hindutva forces. There's also a quote here where he says, while comparing upper caste Hindus with Muslim communalists, he said, quote, charged with this selfish idea of class domination, they take every move to exclude the lower classes of Hindus from wealth, education, and power. This attitude of keeping education, wealth, and power as a close preserve for themselves and refusing to share it, which the high caste Hindus have developed in their relation with the lower classes of Hindus, is sought to be extended by them to the Muslims. They want to exclude the Muslims from place and power as they have done to the lower class Hindus. So you can clearly see that by his words there, even though in other instances he has said negative things about Muslims and Islam, it does seem very clear here that he is saying that Muslims do deserve a share in power and that it's the upper caste Hindus that are preventing this. They're trying to oppress them, keep them down like they have done to the Dalits and all of that. So I think that whenever we talk about Ambedkar, whenever we talk about any person from the past, Gandhi, or people that we actually like on our wavelength like Savarkar or Golwalkar or whoever it may be, we should always, instead of kind of putting a mala on their photo, putting a mala on their statue, actually reading what these people wrote, understanding how they thought, because not everyone that your country kind of considers to be a hero generations in the future really was a hero if you look at how they interacted with issues and topics in their own lifetime. And that's what I want to leave you with today, guys. So please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Jai Shri Ram.